charge of the PA system with little or no experience. So how's the volume level? Okay? I had it down because we had Peachy up here before and he projects quite a bit. So, up. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Mike Malin. I'm currently the president of Suburban North Club. Primarily because nobody else wanted the job, not because of my great leadership skills. We'll see what that does. Welcome. This is a celebration of Hiram's life and memory of him, and we have some family members here and a lot of friends and people that have known Hiram for many years, as I have, and even longer than I have. I knew him for 26 years. Well, that's volume. We have his sister Diana. Want to stand up? Everybody know? This is Hiram's sister Diana. And we have three nieces, Anne, Audra, and Angie. And they have come from far and wide. South Carolina, Wisconsin, and you guys are local. So I met them at Hiram's passing and at the service, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you guys and to be part of this group. We have a song first to start with. We can get Peachy and Blake up here. And this is a song, if you've never heard it, it's by the Yvette Brothers, and it's called No Hard Feelings. And it talks about when my body won't hold me anymore, and that was Hiram's name. So we'll let them sing it for you.
Before we start, I was going to tell a little story. A few years back, when we were still at the old club, we were interested in getting a music fellowship meeting together. And so Peachy approached Hiram with the idea. And Hiram told Peachy, "You just go ahead and do it, and don't you worry about the board. I'll take care of that." When my body won't hold me anymore and it finally lets me free, will I be ready? When my feet won't walk another mile and my lips give their last kiss goodbye, will my hand be steady when I lay down my fears, my hopes and my doubts, the rings on my fingers and the keys to my house? With no hard feelings. When the sun hangs low in the west and the light in my chest won't be kept, held at bay any longer. Jealousy fades away and it's ash and dust, cash and lust. Just hallelujah and love in the thoughts, love in the words, love in the songs they sing in the church, and no hard feelings. Lord knows they haven't done much good for anyone. body won't hold me anymore, and it finally lets me free. Where will I go? Will the trade winds take me south through the Georgia gray? Tropical rain or snow from the heavens? Will I join with the ocean blue or run into a savior true and shake hands laughing and walk through the night straight to the light, holding the love I've known in my life with no hard feelings? Lord knows they haven't done much good for anyone. Kept me afraid and cold, with so much to have and hold. Under the curving sky, I'm finally learning why it matters for me and you to say it and mean it too. For life and its loveliness and all of its ugliness, as good as it's been to me, I have no enemies. I have no enemies. I have no enemies. I have no enemies.
So there were many things that Hiram just did because Hiram thought that was okay. He didn't ask for too many permissions, but I can't remember how many years he did run the club, quite a bit, even when he wasn't officially the manager. He pretty much still ran things while he was there. So what we're going to do is just share some remembrances. And so rather than pass the microphone, if you want to share, we're going to line up here in the chairs, and as you see a chair open, come and fill it, and you can come up and share some stuff. If it goes too long, though, I'm going to play Hiram. So I'll start, and you guys in meetings have heard me say this. I've heard Hiram say that when he came in, he was told to sit down, shut up, you don't know nothing, we'll tell you when to talk. You know, they were hard on him. And I'm glad he didn't treat me that way. I don't think I'd have stuck around very long being treated like that. He loved me, he encouraged me. He was always positive and pointing out the good things. And I'd say, you know, gosh, I yelled at my wife, or I was mean to a cashier or whatever. He'd say, God, you're doing good, Mike. I said, well, how is that good? He'd say, well, you didn't drink over it. You're willing to talk to another recovering person. You're aware of your actions. You wouldn't have even cared before. And then he'd always end up and he'd say, and welcome to the human race. We are not perfect people. We're alcoholic, and you know, being human's hard enough, and you throw alcoholic on top of that. But he always treated me like that, just positive and encouraging. And then I'll tell you one funny story. I did Hiram's laundry for him toward the end because he couldn't drag that basket out to the laundromat and all that, and it was real easy. I have a nice laundry room. And anyway, I had a new sponsee who was real serious about following the program. And he heard us talking about I was going to go get Hiram's laundry, and he got a little timid look on his face, and he said, now, is that normal? Will I be doing your laundry? Like it was some sort of a hazing ritual or something, you know. In AA, I said, I will teach you the secret handshake later. So I think Gary's going to go first and share. Come on up and line up.
Yeah, just come up here, guys, and get in line so we don't have a long time in between each person.
And we got food at 5 o'clock.
Hi everybody, I'm Gary, I'm an alcoholic. I had the pleasure of meeting Hiram 5 years ago. It was almost 5 years ago today, on September 25th, 2017, I came to the Suburban North Club for the first time. Lucky for me, when I came in that first meeting, there was a man sitting there, and me and Fluff walked in, and immediately Hiram engaged us. See, that's what we're supposed to do when we're in meetings, and I'm not pointing out anybody in here, but I guess I am, because we're all in this deal together. But you see a stranger come in the room, the worst thing we can do as alcoholics is shun them and don't get out of our asses and go and shake their hand and introduce ourselves. That's the best service we can do, is to see the newcomer coming through the door and introducing ourselves and try to give them some direction and let them know there's some hope in these rooms. I don't know that it would have made that much difference for me, because I've been in the rooms several times, years before that, in and out. But I know it made a big difference in my life. Hiram also told me that I had to find a sponsor, and I said, well, I've got one. And he goes, well, that's great. He goes, do you have a home group? I said, no. He goes, well, how about the one you just attended? That's a pretty good group. So I made Step Ashore on Thursday as my home group. And I got active in that home group. And then Hiram was always busy at the club doing stuff, and he would get me to, after every meeting, he'd say, hey, stick around after me, and I got some light bulbs I want you to change. And a friend in the program, John, said, you know, I think he had a whole empty box of bad bulbs, and we'd leave, he'd put the old ones back in, just so he could give the new guys some service. As you guys know, that service there started springboarding me to doing more fixing around the old club. The old club was falling apart. You know, we always have those prayers that we were supposed to say, you know, at the end of the meetings. Mine was always, let this building stay, you know, keep standing for a few more months as we were finishing this place up. Because I mean, there was stuff breaking, the toilets were breaking, the doors were falling off the hinges. I mean, that place was falling apart. So I give a lot of credit to people like Hiram that say, get busy. Because, you know, like he said, there's go-getters and there's bullshitters. And he goes, there's a lot of bullshitters in AA. He said, they talk a good game, but they ain't doing shit. And I just choose to be a go-getter. And I try to pattern myself after heroes like that. And, you know, there's a difference between idols and heroes. Idols can be knocked down. Heroes, they're always standing. So I love Hiram Hash, and I got the pleasure to get to know his niece Ann and his sister Diane. And it was been a pleasure to get to know you two. If it wouldn't have been for Hiram, I never would have met you. You're two beautiful women. I really have gotten, you know, it's a pleasure to get to know both of you. All right, that's all I got, y'all.
Thank you.
I'm James, and I'm an alcoholic, I think. I was the guy who was Hiram's sponsor or mentor or mentee. I think he was actually the sponsor. I was the other side of that transaction. Hiram was, I'm sorry to lose him for a lot of reasons. You know, you could call him Charles or Chucky or Sonny or Crash or Stinky or 7,000 other nicknames he had, but he was still Hiram. At the end of the day, he was still Hiram. Hiram was one of those guys that I took Hiram to lunch. We had there's a bunch of us guys that ate lunch, have eaten lunch together since Tom K. and John G. started this thing in 2002, we think. And we've been eating every Thursday for lunch. And I would take Hiram with me to lunch every Thursday. And he'd always want to know how we were going to get there, because he didn't want to drive. But I knew damn well he worked at Fisher's, he worked at Carmel, he knew every road. I don't even know why he asked me, but he always asked me every week, where are we going? How are we going to get there? That was Hiram. You know, he took those steps at the end that were about 3 inches long, and from him I learned the word patience. Because I took Hiram to lunch, I would drop him off the closest I could to the door, go park the truck, come back, and he was still on the way into the restaurant. But he always wanted to go.
And that was part of what made him. Hiram and I shared a lot of stuff. In the last couple years, his prayer every night was exactly the same. Dear God, please take me tonight so I don't have to suffer again through tomorrow. Because he was in so much pain. And most of you never knew the amount of pain that man was in. He had trouble getting up in the morning. He had trouble staying up in the morning. That was Hiram. And yet he came across, he had that cane. He could beat the hell out of you with that cane if he wanted to. He always told me he was going to do it. And I always told him wherever we ate at lunch, I was going to leave him there. He'd have to call a cab and go home. And we went through this pretty much every week. And you know, that was Hiram. And that's what I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss that guy, the last mayor of Hortonville. Ain't never going to be another mayor of Hortonville. That was the last one. There's never going to be another Charles Hiram Hash. Ever. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Barb Alcoholic. And I'm going to make this story really short because I've been struck with that cane before. And I don't want to have it done again. This is pretty short because I told this to Diane and her niece at the funeral. I walked into these rooms when I was 75 years old. And the reason I walked into these rooms was because Hiram saved my grandson, and my grandson saved me. And I love this program so passionately, and my grandson knows this big book inside and out, and he has helped me so much, but Hiram was so special, and I am so grateful because he saved my life and my grandson. Thank you.
I'm Tom Keller, I'm an alcoholic. Hiram, I remember whenever I was going, he was jealous of me because I had 30 more days than you had. But he was always there, and he always showed up, and I just miss him completely. I moved over to Brownsburg, and I just don't get here that often anymore. I certainly will miss him. He's a hell of a man.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey, if you don't talk up there, we can't keep a recording of it for his family, so if you would walk up and front to speak, that would be
We're not gonna have any food till 5, whether you talk or not.
Okay. My name's Sherry and I'm an alcoholic. Okay. I know, his sister's niece here. I love him, but I curse and I get hit with a finger. And I got that from mine. And, okay. So I've been kind of abused by men. I really don't like men, sorry. They're half the population on this earth, but you know, whatever. I'm a sometimes silly person, and anyhow, so I used to hide in women's only meetings, and I would take the money into the office, and Don sat in the office, and I figured he was safe because she was sitting behind the desk and sitting in a chair. And one day I was sitting there talking to Don, and Hiram was sitting out in the lobby, and we started talking, and I'm like, what a hoot. This guy was such a hoot, you know? And I felt safe with him. And he was the first man, I mean, Don was sitting behind a desk, that's the only reason he was safe. But Hiram was the first man I felt safe with at the club. And he gave me total love and acceptance, and I thought he was like amazing. I'm really trying not to curse. Okay, So, now, I have a kid that's one of us, and he started this route when he was 13 years old, got sober at 17 with 3 rehabs and juvie in the middle. But when he would first come to meetings, Hiram in the North Room, Hiram would knock on the window and he'd go. And I swear, that's what got him coming back to meetings. And then, so Hiram, whenever Hiram and I would see each other, we give each other the finger. And so now when I give you the finger, it's with love and acceptance. And Hiram's going, Hiram's right here with me and with everybody in these rooms. And I think everybody's higher power is different. My higher power suffuses everything. And I think Hiram's in these walls and everything. So that's it, Pastor.
Call Guinness. I didn't hear the F word once.
I'm Jerry and I'm an alcoholic. And I met Hiram 35 years ago when I came into the program, and I don't know if I was pregnant at the time, but shortly after that I was, and had my son, who turned 34 this past June. My son went to his first meeting when he was 6 days old, and Hiram liked to tell that story because he and some of the guys would take my son out of the room because he grew up in AA, and he was a toddler, and he became more and more, disruptive at meetings, and Hiram or some of the guys would take him out, play with him in the hallway, so I could have meetings to stay sober. And and I'm just sorry that Hiram is not here to see this, because my son turned into one of us, not surprising. And I've dragged him to AA meetings over the years, and Hiram would always, give him a good talking to and say, I remember playing with you in the hallway, and we're gonna keep you sober, come on back, keep coming on back. And my son is now 16 days sober. All right. Very involved in AA. He's living in Lafayette right now, and I told him about this, and he said, I wish I could be there. And I said, well, Hiram always spoke very highly of you and the memories that he had. So he is going to be missed. You can go anywhere around the area, downtown, any meeting anywhere, and say nobody got here from eating too many green beans. And we all know that was a Hiramism. That's all.
Hey guys, I'm Andy, alcoholic. Hey. This is awesome, this celebration. I got sober in 07 at the other club, and I remember I got sober at the 9 a.m. meeting, and it was a meeting that was, I think maybe there was one day it wasn't, but it was pretty much every day. And I'd see Hiram all the time, and I got involved in INCIPA, Indiana Conference of Young People in AA, and I would go every day, and I would announce my event every day. I figured maybe they were sleeping the day before, so I'd tell them what was going on. And Hiram one day said he was going to come to one of the conferences, out of state, and he registered and everything, and he really was going to come, but then his health, his health wasn't good, so he wasn't able to go. But he was just a huge part of my early sobriety. I remember when I first got sober, I didn't know, people go to more than one meeting, and they would tell me, all right, we'll see you tomorrow. So I would just keep coming back, every day at the 9 a.m. But, in early sobriety, we went to meetings all over. And I remember one time my friends and I went to the east side. It was Club East, and it was back when it was in a strip mall, back on, I think on Washington Street. And I walk in there, and it was an evening meeting, and Hiram's there. I'm like, the hell, I could not believe, people go outside of, just Noblesville, he was older, too. I'm like, dude, I didn't know that dude would be all the way on the east side, and it was just, so comforting to see, wow, this dude's doing it. And a huge part of my very early sobriety is there was a guy, Dick. He was at my 9 a.m. home group, and I think Dick Beatty is his name, and he got sober. He was coughing all the time, and I didn't know. I just thought maybe he smoked too much. But later I found out he was going through dialysis and all that, and he died sober, and that was the day that I was like, oh my God, like he knew he was gonna die and he stayed sober. And that was like the day I was like, I'm getting the AA tattoo on my wrist. And and Hiram was like, you coming to the funeral? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, you're a hungry member. That's what we do. We go to the funeral. And so I went, and Hiram spoke at that funeral, I believe. And it was just like, the whole thing was like so, it impacted me. At 30 days sober or somewhere around there, like for this guy to die sober and for Hiram to come and for Hiram, like everybody has said, like he just grabbed you in and took you and loved you, and it was hard love, and I just remember so much. I don't know, and I remember he probably said this. I remember in the early sobriety he'd say, back in my day, like if you needed $1, you took $1 and put $1 in, and like I don't know, just all the things he said. Like I don't know. I mean, I could just go on for hours, but I'm gonna let this guy here speak. But anyhow, I don't know. I just love him, and I'm so glad that we're all here to celebrate his life, and I hope someday that I can make some kind of a little impact like he's made, and so I'm just gonna keep coming back. That's all I got. Thanks.
Hello everyone, I'm Kevin and I'm an alcoholic. My higher power said that I needed to get up and say something today to get out of myself and just to experience what AA does for all of us. I'm pretty sure 6.5 years ago when I started that Hiram would sit around the side of the building in his car and see me come up, and that's when he would pull his car up, full of paper products and everything that he needed help with the car, because I'm telling you, for the first 3 or 4 months, every time I'd walk up, he had something for me to do, and that's what we do. I spent the last 3 years actually being a neighbor to Hiram. It seems like I followed him to whatever apartment complex he went to. I think that was a little way, again, of my higher power keeping Hiram and just keeping fellowship together. I can remember his strength and perseverance once in January when I go to walk out of my car and his damn car doors are frozen shut. And the only thing he can think of to do is get into the back seat. So he is trying to crawl himself out of the driver's seat to the back seat. And I just look over and I just see these 2 feet up. I'm like, Hiram, what? He's like, I'm stuck. So, I mean, it was a whole process of pulling the back seat down and getting him out of that car. And, I shared a little one on social media about I asked him to cat sit for me once for just a couple hours. So I took my cat downstairs, put it in his bathroom, set everything up so it was out of the way. But I come down a couple hours later and he's sitting in his chair and Kitty is just sitting on his lap. I mean, I could have probably left her there and they would have been totally happy. Again, I'm not making this about myself, but I've had a tough day, and I needed to get up and say something to get out of myself and to remind us all how wonderful Hiram was. Thanks.
Some of these things we're learning as we, more and more about Hiram that I didn't know. Especially when Angie found out at her 40th class reunion, Westfield class reunion.
Yeah, Friday night.
Go ahead, and then.
An old neighbor of ours says, I got a story about Hiram you probably don't know. He's a big IU fan. He was at a Purdue game
Yeah.
And the guy sitting across from him and his friend Mike,
Mm-hmm.
we were at the game, and he didn't like call around the game. So he was standing up yelling, and he was escorted out of the game. So the neighbor said, I look over and Hiram's back. And he was like, he paid to go back in. And he said it was even the end of the third quarter, but he wanted to get back in there.
He's bound and determined I'm gonna have, even, but that was
Just a little
little
story.
things that we find out later after he's gone to be, with Jesus, but he would always call me, and Mike, at the funeral on the 26th, oh yes, I remember all these times that Hiram would call me and say, who's calling, please? And I says, wait a minute, I'm your sister, you're the one that called me. So I went through the same experience as Mike did, and she brought up this, but
Talk loud. Talk loud.
He's gonna have one more shot, doesn't he?
But all these neat things as we were growing up, I don't know, all of you were at the funeral, someone, the Wizard Mason was out of town. But something that was so precious to me on how Hiram would be so attentive to his big sister, thought she had it under control. And he was like, I was about 6 years old, he was about 3. And so I was upset with my mother for some reason, but anyway, I said, I'm gonna run away, and Hiram, you wanna go with me? And so he thought, well, this is an adventure, So I took his hand, and we went in these high weeds behind the pasture behind my parents' house. And we were there for, it seemed like about an hour at least. And I thought, boy, I said, we're gonna be out here a while. And Mom and Dad never did come to look for us. So I said, well, but he was so good. And he said, my sister's got it under control, and but I didn't, there's a lot of funny things that happen in our life. But that's some of them that, I remember, he was known as Chicky, and I had no idea, He worked at Amalia's there in Carmel, Range Line Road, for over 25 years. He started as an assistant manager and made a manager later. And I'm going in to give him something, and I says, because my mother worked there also in the flower department. And I thought, well, I don't want to wait. I'll just take it to him at where his work. So I said, because he was known as Sonny to me, growing up. And I says, I just wanted to check and see if Sonny's here. And he said, and the guy had no idea who I was talking about, who? I says, I mean Hiram. I says, oh yes, but he's Chicky around here. And I thought, oh, he had actually started out as Chuck, because I guess it's short for Charles, and then went to Chicky, and all that. But it's things that, while he was at Amalia's, he was at Northview Christian Life and as an usher there. And while he was at Amalia's, he bought my daughter, all the wedding cakes for my daughter's wedding. And he was in an usher in all 3 of the weddings too. So in the screens at the funeral home, you could see him dressed up in tux and everything, That was a special occasions for him. And I'm gonna miss him. It's just, just don't learn about all these things and all these people that he's known through AA. And that just touches my heart. And how much he's accomplished, obstacles in his life, and he overcame them, So, okay.
Hey everybody, I'm Kip Watts, alcoholic drug addict. When I got here, we didn't have a club. We actually met in the Catholic Church, had a community center there on 10th Street, and we used to meet there. And at the time, I really didn't want to belong here. I was in such denial that I'd get here right at 8 o'clock, and I'd time it, make sure I got in there. I sat in the corner, I didn't share, I pouted. And as soon as everybody circled up for the Lord's Prayer, I'd head out. Didn't talk to anybody. This went on, I don't know, 4 or 5 meetings. And then one time, Hiram got between me and the door. And he stuck his hand out, introduced himself. And I'd already had all this collateral in my head why I didn't belong. I'm hearing all this stuff about God, all these people with religious troubles and all the rest of that. And I went on to explain that this probably isn't going to work for me because, you know, I wasn't raised in this kind of stuff. I don't know if you know anything about Quakerism, but I grew up with a personal relationship, everything you guys are already telling me, and it didn't work. Well, apparently Hiram had spent some time in the Friends Church too, and he knew all about it. And for a long time, I think we were the only 2 Quakers in recovery. But he was the first person that really made me feel welcome, really made me feel, you know, I got at least one person I could bounce some ideas off, and he told me to put all the God stuff aside for now. And if it helped me at that point, that rock outside probably had more power over drugs and alcohol than I did that day. And he was right, and I kept it that simple. I was going through quite a few marital, financial issues. And Hiram thought I had too much time to think about my problems. So he'd say, you know, why don't you drive me down to Salvation Army? We'll go catch a meeting. Why don't we go to Blue Diamond? You know, he liked to go where the people were right off the street and really reach out to them. He got me started very early into service work. And then I took that and got involved in corrections work, which I still enjoy today. I get a lot out of that. It's a different era. They got you involved, they got you plugged in very quickly, and you know, I didn't have enough sobriety to sponsor people, but I had enough sobriety to make coffee, empty ashtrays, throw my hand out to the next person I didn't know. And this went on and on. But probably the most significant thing came, I had almost 3 years of sobriety. And I started dating Jill, who had 11 months. And for those who don't know, the rule is a year. And they say bad things about people who date people with less than a year. And everybody had an opinion on whether I should be dating Jill or not. Got reamed by her sponsor pretty good about it. I go, Hiram, what do I do? What do I do? And he goes, well, check your motives. Do you like her? Do you see a future? You got kids? You're going to be bringing kids into this? You know, what's your motives? I said, Hiram, I really think we can make it. You know, I think I'm in this for the right reasons. It's just all these other people. And he goes, F-bomb. Yeah. F-bomb them. They're probably just jealous that you have a girlfriend. They don't. 2 years later, he was at our wedding. And we've been together nearly 30 years, so I'd say it was the right decision. So, thank you. Keep coming, right? Keep coming, right?
Hello, everyone. Carla, alcoholic. All right. Hiram Hash. Charles Hiram Hash is my hero. His passion touched me and kept me sober. On the grand opening of our beautiful club, he nearly wept all day. It was that day that I knew my tears were cleansing my soul and full of passion early in sobriety. It's my belief that Hiram hung on for all of us, despite his pain. Once this club was open and he celebrated his 40th birthday, it was evident to me that his work here was done. He shared in one of his last meetings, he dreamed his girlfriend would knock on his door. My higher power who I call God, put it on my heart to be sure he had 2 girlfriends knock on his door. My sober sister, Allie's son, and I did just that. We cleaned his apartment and shared a meal with him. Allie's mother sent with us. It was a wonderful experience. On the day our brother Gary got Hiram to the hospital, just before he passed, I was in this room and heard love, laughter, and clapping. I ran out to see what I was missing, and there was an amazing heart-shaped cloud in the sky. It was a beautiful spiritual experience for us all. On the day he passed, I was on a trail at Eagle Creek Park taking a photo of the sky. In that moment, a trusted friend sent me the message that he had passed. Later that night, I looked at that photo and there was a heart-shaped cloud in the sky. The next day, my sober sister Allie was on her way on one of her road trips. She sent me a picture of the open road and the sky, and in the sky there was a very defined heart-shaped cloud. These amazing experience shared with Allie are our confirmation that Hiram is with us all still, and he went from being our earth angel and my hero to being our true angel from heaven.
My name's Allie. I'm an alcoholic. I did not know how to follow that. But Carla and I's last time with Hiram was very special. We got to go over and clean his apartment and share a meal with him and clip his fingernails and give him a little manicure, even though he was like, but we made it through. We got through every finger. And then Hiram wanted me to take him to the hospital to find a new RA doctor. And then the day that I was supposed to go pick him up, he didn't answer the phone, and I kept calling. And then he called me back a few days later and left me a voicemail. So if anybody wants to hear Hiram's voice, I'll happily share it. Oh, sure, I read it.
Returning your call a few days late. This is Hiram. I'm doing all right. Peace and love.
Peace and love was the last thing I heard from him. So, I'm very grateful.
Howdy. I'm Chris. I'm an alcoholic. There's, like everybody else, there's 100 things I could say. I narrowed it down to 3. I've known him for 18 years, and one of the first times I met him, he pointed at me in his way, which was because he had rheumatoid. This is how Hiram pointed. And he said, do something nice for somebody and don't tell a soul. And I thought it was all about doing something nice for someone. But as I tried to embody that and to do it, the don't tell a soul was the secret, extremely difficult, growing part. I think he figured most of us can do something nice for someone, but the don't tell a soul part was what I knew I had to start working on. To stop filling a bottomless pit of my self-esteem with good deeds and just relax and do good. The second thing I wanted to say is, one of my other favorite things Hiram introduced me to was had to, needed to, wanted to, loved to. In that order, it happens. And I remember having to go to meetings to fill out the little card. I remember finally figuring out that I needed to go to meetings. I'm in the 3rd stage, maybe approaching the 4th. I want to go to meetings, and when I see Sue and the other folks in my home group, I realize I love to. And
18 years ago, Hiram predicted the future. And he probably continues to. Finally, even though Hiram, I listened to everything he said, like a lot of people in here, I think he would like to be remembered as a man of action, not words. It was the actions. And it was easy to miss that with him because he was pretty, I thought he was pretty articulate. He didn't look to me like he should be articulate, but he was. I'm sorry to sound biased, but he didn't look like those words could come out of his mouth so consistently. But I could also tell he didn't think it was that important. It was the deeds. So I am a physician. I have Hiram's picture in my office. And over the past several years, 2 patients have looked funny at that picture and said they know that man. And both of those gentlemen were males who ended up confessing that they'd gotten in trouble somehow and didn't go into detail, but they told me that Hiram was there and helped put them on a path to get themselves not only out of trouble, but towards a good life. I've been practicing for 30 years. That's 2 patients. I am going to leave that picture in my office for as long as I can, and I'm going to see how many more I can get a hold of that knew him and that would say that about him. And those are the thoughts I had. Thanks for letting me say it.
Everybody, I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. My name's Tom. Hey, Tom. This is my beautiful wife, Vinny. She'll introduce herself in a minute, but I wanted to say wife because you guys will know I married up. So, so we met Hiram. We moved here in 2006, and I went to the club for the first time. And my wife's always inquiring how things, went. She asked me if I met anybody interesting, and I'm like, yeah, I met this old man that I'm pretty sure we're going to be friends. And I don't know if it was at Christmas or the next, but so eventually Hiram started coming over for our Thanksgiving, Christmas dinners, 4th of July, Easter, stuff like that. He got to know her 7 nephews. So we may know a little bit different side, softer side of Hiram. I think he softened up a lot around Jennifer. But it's just been what a blessing. I've got to travel with him a little bit on some road trips, overnight road trips, and I used to take him to Fatima too. And that was awesome because Hiram gets, treatment wherever he goes. So we got, I got to stay right next to him in the best rooms and all that stuff. So that was pretty cool. So one day we're driving to Fatima, and now I'm 20 years sober at the time, and we were talking about the 13th step. So Kip made me think about this, and somebody was doing that around the club, believe it or not. And so we were talking about it, and he said, well, you know what that is, right? And I said, yeah, it's when you're having a relationship, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, it's when it's the 13th step. He said, it's the first step, my life's unmanageable, and the 12th step, I'd like to share it with you. Okay, so in closing, just, Hiram and I just had but at the end of the day, we had a relationship of being recovered in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I noticed that they were playing the ceremony here in May, and Hiram got up here, and it was really cool. People helped him get up here, and when he got up here, he says, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Hiram. So there's a book in the office that Hiram carried for years and years, but in February of 2021, he started carrying a 2nd edition big book. And I was with him when he got this book in the mail, and there was absolutely nothing written in it. So I noticed that 3 pages he highlighted, and I'm going to read the last thing that he highlighted in here. Comes from Dr. Bob's nightmare. Dr. Bob says, I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learn to others who want and need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons. It's a sense of duty. It's a pleasure. Because in so doing, I am paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. And because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip. So.
And I wanted to read it because it reminds me of Hiram. So bear with me, it's 2 pages, but it's a good poem. It's worth listening to. I Stand by the Door by Sam Shoemaker. I stand by the door. I neither go too far in nor stay too far out. The door is the most important door in the world. It is the door through which men walk when they first find God. There is no use my going way inside and staying there, when so many are still outside and they, as much as I, crave to know where the door is. And all that so many ever find is only the wall where the door ought to be. They creep along the wall like blind men with outstretched, groping hands, feeling for a door, knowing there must be a door, yet they never find it. So I stand by the door. The most tremendous thing in the world is for men to find that door, the door to God. The most important thing that any man can do is to take hold of one of those blind, groping hands and put it on the latch that only clicks and opens to the man's own touch. Men die outside the door as starving beggars die on cold nights in cruel cities in the dead of winter. Die for want of what is within their grasp. They live on the other side of it, live because they have not found it. Nothing else matters compared to helping them find it and open it and walk in and find Him. So I stand by the door. Go in, great saints, go all the way in. Go way down into the cavernous cellars and way up into the spacious attics. It is a vast, roomy house, this house where God is. Go into the deepest of hidden casements, of withdrawal, of silence, of sainthood. Some must inhabit those inner rooms and know the depths and heights of God and call outside to the rest of us how wonderful it is. Sometimes I take a deeper look in, sometimes venture in a little farther, but my place seems closer to the opening. So I stand by the door. There is another reason why I stand there. Some people get part way in and become afraid, lest God and the zeal of His house devour them. For God is so very great and asks all of us. And these people feel a cosmic claustrophobia and want to get out. Let me out, they cry. And the people way inside only terrify them more. Somebody must be by the door to tell them that they are spoiled. For the old life they have seen too much. One taste of God and nothing but God will do anymore. Somebody must be watching for the frightened, who seek to sneak out just where they came in, to tell them how much better it is inside. The people too far in do not see how near these are to leaving, preoccupied with the wonder of it all. Somebody must watch for those who have entered the door but would like to run away. So for them too, I stand by the door. I admire the people who go way in, but I wish they would not forget how it was before they got in. Then they would be able to help the people who have not yet even found the door, or the people who want to run away, again from God. You can go in too deeply and stay in too long, and forget the people outside the door. As for me, I shall take my old accustomed place, near enough to God to hear Him and know He is there, but not so far from men as to not hear them, and remember, they are there too. Where? Outside the door. Thousands of them, millions of them. But more important for me, one of them, 2 of them, 10 of them, whose hands I am intended to put on the latch. So I shall stand by the door and wait for those who seek it. I had rather be a doorkeeper, so I stand by the door. That's Hiram.
I'm Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. I see a lot of familiar faces out there. It's good to see all your faces. We are truly a family. I had a sponsor, a guy offered to sponsor me at the very beginning when I came in 23 years ago. And he put up with me for 5 years, and then he said he had enough, and he took off for Texas. And he said, you got 24 hours to find another sponsor. And I'd seen this old, kindly old gentleman sitting around. He seemed so sweet and so gentle, and almost like a grandfather.
So I asked him, he said, well, sure. He said, I won't sponsor you, but I'll take you through the big book. And I found out he wasn't as kind and gentle and grandfatherly as I thought he was going to be. He was kind of tough. And, but he took me through the steps, he took me through the big book, and he took me through how to live my life better than I was living it before by having me clean ashtrays. This is a Windex bottle, this is a paper towel, this is the old club, old club. See that glass case out there? I want you to spray it, wipe it down, spray it, wipe it down, then throw the towel away and then put Windex away. He was very specific because he knows with alcoholics, they gotta be really specific or we'll go wandering off in the tall weeds. He would see me doing something that I was probably gonna get in trouble with, he'd go, Tom, come here. And he'd take my shirt collar like this, come with me, I got some work I need you to do. And he'd have me take trash out to the dumpster. He'd have me clean the toilets. And then once he got me into service, he said, now, do something nice for somebody, but don't tell anybody. Usually with a-hole afterwards. And I thought, well, sure, I can do that. Well, not a chance. Wasn't near as easy as I thought it'd be. But he was my sponsor for 18 years. And I miss him terribly. I miss him every day. And yet I look out here and I see him all over this room. He's here in every one of us. He's helped us all. His beautiful family. So glad you're here. We love him to pieces. And we'll keep on loving him forever. He did so much for all of us. That's all I got. Let's get you up first.
I guess I ought to let all you people know that we aren't all named Tom, but I'm Tom. I've been in the program for a little bit when I met Hiram. And the one thing I found out real quick, Hiram was somebody I could always go to and sit down and talk. And usually he had the answer if I was willing to listen. But one thing I sat back in the room and talked real loud earlier, but it was only because it's difficult to walk. I'm going through a hip replacement right now. But Hiram and I had just about the same amount of sobriety. And he used to always complain when I picked up my toping because I had 30 days more than he did. But he spent a lot of time at the clubs. I think this is the 8th club I've been to since I've been here. At any rate, my second wife, my first wife filed for divorce the minute I came into AA. But my second wife I met in AA. And she just started volunteering at the club. But the one really good thing about Hiram with my wife was she'd come home very happy. She was never upset, seemed like, when she spent the day with Hiram. But I will miss him a lot, even though we used to kid each other. But I remember when I first met him, he was introduced to me as Crash Hash. And that's when I found out what I shouldn't have asked. It was a long story. But at any rate, I will miss him a lot, so I appreciate it. And like I say, I'm not the only Tom.
Hi, I'm Justin Alcoholic. I met Cain first. Early on, one of my first meetings, the meeting had started, somebody came in late and they didn't close the door. And so this old man that I never talked to, I feel a whack on my leg. Close the door. Did what I was told. I sat back down. I'm new at the program. I had just gotten sponsored. Barely started working with him. As I was leaving, he did make sure that that wasn't my only interaction with him. He shook my hand, told me who his name was. I barely remembered it, but I did remember him. I don't really remember what he said, but I remember it being, it was encouraging, and he told me to get to work with the sponsor. I found out later that my sponsor's sponsor was Hiram. So throughout almost 8 years being in the program, working with my sponsor, I heard plenty of Hiram through my sponsor. I found that out only after having a few meetings with Hiram. It was just, I could hear the similarities. And I guess I just wanted to just come up here just to show, as all of you know, that as you get better in this program, better at life, better, not perfect, right? But, you start seeing fruits. I remember him telling me that, and I'm one of the fruit. There's one sitting over here, countless others that aren't even here today. But I never forgot having meetings with him, just randomly. I went there, my sponsor wasn't there, and so he caught me on the way out the door, and he said, I got 30 minutes, come sit down with me. So I was kind of scared. And it was great, of course it was. When his second meeting come, he said, all right, stick around with me. He made me stay in the meeting. I think you can just tell I needed it, and it was as good as any meeting I've ever been to. So I never forgot him. I didn't get to know him really all that well, but at that old club, every time I saw him, he'd come over and make sure I was doing all right. But he also knew who my sponsor was, and so he knew I was in good hands. But they felt like his hands too, so I just wanted to say that I appreciate everything that he's ever done, not just for me, but for anyone else who's in here.
Hi, I'm Susan. I'm an alcoholic. Wanted to say, first of all, I love the stories. So I met Hiram about 5 years ago. I had just retired and was going to the 9 o'clock meeting on a regular basis, and I historically had gone to meetings in the Castleton area, and decided I wanted to start going to morning meetings because I'd always been to evening meetings. So this is when the club was over on Allisonville, 10th Street. And so I remember the first time I went to a meeting there, and Hiram was there, and it was always a pretty big meeting, about 40 people, and didn't really think anything, when I first saw him. And then there was a newcomer there, and so Hiram started sharing, and he's just got this gruff exterior, and he's kind of just hammering it down to this guy, and he's got his cane, and next thing I know, he's beating on the floor with it, and I'm thinking, who in the hell is this guy? And people are just kind of holding on to his every word, and I'm thinking, what is this, the bleeding deacon of AA or something? And, and I was just I was just, you know, kind of taken back by him, initially. But here's what I learned over the years. I learned that when people really were having trouble or needed help, they went to Hiram. I learned that he was the person who always made a choice of going to that newcomer, every newcomer, and saying, I'm glad you came today, and come back. And when that newcomer came back, Hiram was the person that came up to him and said, I'm glad you came back. The third time I went to that meeting, Hiram came up to me and said, how are you doing, sweetie? I'm glad you came back to the meeting. and it just kind of took me back, but that was Hiram. And the thing about it was that he was so genuine. You could tell when people are just kind of saying shit to be saying shit, but Hiram spoke from the heart. I heard this saying in AA, in order to touch the heart, one must speak from the heart. And you knew when he shared something, he spoke from the heart. I had the joy of coming to the grand opening here, and Hiram came up here and spoke about the history of AA in the Noblesville area, from the very beginning meetings, up into the, that little house they were in, and then to, the place over on 10th Street, and then here. And as I was listening to him, I just thought, thank God for putting this man in AA. Thank God we had someone like that kept on going. From that little house to the house on 10th Street to this beautiful facility. He was so instrumental in all of that. And how grateful I am that old fart, as I called him at the very beginning, was there for me. That my sobriety today was very instrumental in him being part of AA. And for that, I will always be grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, a really good way to get me to talk for not as long is to put these two guys behind me. I'm Mark. I'm an alcoholic. I was at Hiram's funeral. Mike did this gag where he acted like he got a phone call, and then he said, just want you to know that you're not the only one that thinks of you. And the whole room burst out laughing, and the whole room was in on the joke, which I have to admit totally pissed me off, because I thought I was the only person that happened with, which obviously it wasn't. My experience, it was very similar to experiences other people have described. When I first got to the club, Hiram started finding things for me to do. It always seemed to involve toilet paper for one reason or another. I don't know if there was a humility message there or what it was, but that was this thing that was going on. And I had only been at the club maybe for a week, I guess it was, and he sent me out to the car to get something and bring it in. And when I came back in, he said, oh, hey, you know what? You need to know there's a lockbox on that front door, and you need to know what the combination is to that lockbox. Which I thought was odd, because I wasn't trying to get in the building when it was locked, but I was like, okay, so he had me write it down, and I did. And I stuck it in my pocket, and that was the end of it. I didn't think much more about it. A couple of years later, I end up, I'm president of the club. And now I'm really caught up in this idea of operational security. And I'm talking to one of the staff people, And I said, you know, one of the things that we need to do is get a handle on how many keys there are out there to this office. And that's exactly what happened. She started laughing. She goes, Hiram has given away hundreds of keys to this office. And more than that to the building. In fact, there's probably more people with keys to this building in Noblesville than people that don't have keys to this building. And I was really, really upset about this. So I ended up one day cornering Hiram, and I said, Hiram, you have got to stop giving away keys to this building. There's a reason for keys. Certain people are supposed to have them. You have got to stop giving them. And he goes, what happens if one of those people aren't here and an alcoholic can't get the door? He stuck his crooked finger at me while he said that. And that was the end of the argument, you know. Hiram has taught me a ton over the years. I've got places in my big book where Hiram has told me to write things down. I've got many, many, many lessons that he's taught me. Over the last few years, and I mentioned this in the 7 a.m. meeting this morning, actually, we were talking about carrying the message, you know, and in the last few years, the great message that Hiram has talked about is, and James, of course, knew the depth of Hiram's pain. Anybody that saw Hiram move over the last few years especially knew how much pain Hiram was in. And the reality is I've sat in hundreds of meetings with Hiram, and I never heard him once complain, you know? I never heard Hiram bare his soul of his problems in an AA meeting. And I don't say that to the new people that are here that haven't worked the steps and haven't had the relief that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous brings to you, to say to you, you gotta shut up and not share your problems in a meeting. That's not what my point is, but I've learned this lesson from Hiram. I am somebody who has been through the 12 steps of this program, and I am somebody who has had the obsession for alcohol lifted from me. And because I am one of those people, my obligation is to carry the message. You don't need to hear my problems. I'm here to help you. That's the thing I've learned from Hiram, and it's the thing that I'll carry with me forever because of him. So thanks for listening.
Hi everybody, my name's Kevin and I am an alcoholic. It's wonderful to see everybody here this afternoon. I met Hiram 35 years ago when I was brand new in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was a home group member of the Tough Love group in Noblesville. And I was a snot-nosed kid who desperately wanted to stop drinking and using. Was fairly well convinced I was an alcoholic, but there was still a little bit of degree of doubt. And I was looking for reasons not to belong, not to come back. And there were some men in that particular group that gave me some reason not to come back. And but one of the things that touched me today was hearing Jenny talk about the man standing by the door, because that's kind of how I see Hiram. In those early days of my sobriety, he was the guy, and he was inside the room. He wasn't outside. He was inside that room, and but he was close to the door, and he took me aside and encouraged me, and just couldn't have been a better ambassador to keep coming back. Even if your ass falls off, keep coming back. Pick up your ass and bring it back. And I'll just never forget him. In my mind, Hiram is the epitome of And that's how I remember him when I first came in these rooms. And then when I think of the Suburban North Club, and I started coming to the Suburban North Club when it was off of Allisonville Road down in the house. And he was just as involved there as he was involved here. And you know, to me, when I think of the Suburban North Club, he's the first person that comes to my mind. When I go to meetings in other places, I'm looking for that guy in the room that reminds me of Hiram and some other men in the program who've been instrumental in my life. You know, it's people like him that keep the legacy of Alcoholics Anonymous going forward. And I wouldn't be fair to Hiram if I didn't come up and tell you that. I love that man. I too will always remember that message on my voicemail. Hey, just wanted you to know I was thinking about you today, so you don't have to think about yourself as much. You know, and I too thought I was the only one that got that deal. I should know better. You know, I do remember at one point at a meeting in the Suburban North Club, and I was in attendance with Hiram, and just thinking to myself, this man here, Hiram Hash, has been transformed by the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That man who I first met 35 years ago had changed so much for the better. And I mean, he was awesome then, but I just remember thinking to myself, AA transformed this man. And if it can have that kind of power over him, it can have that kind of power over me and anybody sitting in this room today. So anyways, I'm just very appreciative that our paths crossed, and I will miss him dearly. Thanks.
It's funny, Mark, when I saw you and Kevin come up here, I thought I better get up there. My name is Daryl. I'm an alcoholic. It's a pleasure to meet you. That's why I came up here. I remember Hiram was one of the first people that I saw years ago when I went to the old club, the last club. I shouldn't say the old club. Some of you know the older club. And one of the things that he had me do was take out trash the first time I met him. And then every time that I saw him, he'd look at me, you know, and he didn't have to tell me. I'm like, you know, yeah, I'm gonna go get the trash. I said, which one? He says, well, go check. So that was his deal. He wanted me every time I came in the building to go check every one of the trash cans. And I'd say check, and he goes, you go to the women's bathroom? Go check. And every time that I went to a meeting after that, I would always look for him. There's a line in the forward to the first edition that says to show other alcoholics precisely how we recovered. When I got here initially, I'm going to circle this back to that, I was so concerned about what you thought of me. And I would go to a lot of meetings. I went to like 120 meetings in 90 days. And I'm a thief, so I came in as a spiritual thief, and I'd come to a meeting, and if Chris said something funny or profound, I'd steal it. I'd wait till Chris wasn't around and say it, because I wanted everyone to think I knew what was going on. And he finally came up to me and said, quit giving your opinion about things you hadn't done. Why don't you get somebody and work the steps? I said, how do you know that? He said, well, I'm not gonna, he said, you can't BS a BSer, I think is what he said. I did that. That changed my life. And you know, I later had the privilege of leading some workshops, and Hiram showed up. And I remember asking him, like, why are you coming to the workshop? He said, first I wanted to see if you really work the steps. And later he said, just kidding. Because we never should stop working the steps. So I was sad that I had a commitment. I wasn't able to get to the funeral, but I thought about him the entire day. And like you've heard some of the other people say, I love him. He made me feel important every time I saw him. And he listened with as much intention as so many newcomers want to be heard with. And that's what I remember about him, that he paid attention. And he'd ask about my family after we met him. So we're fortunate to have been touched by Hiram, and I'm really glad to be here today because there's so many people in this room that I love and that have helped me. So thank you.
Some people have to cheat. I'm James, I'm an alcoholic. And for those of you who used to listen to that old radio show called The Paul Harvey Show, and now for the rest of the story, page 2. Ladies, I'm glad you're all here. You were talking about that combination on the lock on the 1811 South 10th Street. When we moved down there, I was the one that set the combination. I thought, what in the heck will I set the combination to? Well, it's easy. I'll just set it to my birthday, 713. The combination doesn't care what order it's in. So 317, the area code, nobody could forget the combination. So it was pretty simple. I have a couple of old Hiram stories. He got the name Crash for an interesting reason. He's the only one I know in Noblesville that ran into a train on 8th Street. He drove into the train, and it wasn't so bad that he drove into the train. It was they put it in the paper as Charles Hash did it, and the old man was so pissed off. He chased him for hours and never got him because he thought, there goes our business, when they were still selling cars. If you want to go back to a Hiram story, Hiram worked, obviously Diane's talked, he worked at O'Malley's, and he used to drink at a bar in Carmel called Steckley's. And at one end of the bar was another friend of ours, Pat F., who has now been sober some 39 plus years. And Hiram was sitting on the other end of the bar. And Pat would look at Hiram and say, that son of a bitch is an alcoholic. He should not even be in here. Hiram would be sitting at the other end of the bar pointing back, saying the same exact thing. Several years later, both of them ended up in AA. And we got a Hiram, and we got a Pat, and we got all of you. Thanks.
I'm an alcoholic. I can't add anything really. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of stories about Hiram. The main reason I came out and spoke is because the short money was on me not speaking, and so I didn't want to piss off the people that gave the odds. Hiram gave me one of my nicknames. My real last name is Peachy, and Hiram was the guy that first called me Speechy. I talk a lot. I have a gift of gab. And I remember it was probably my second meeting here, and Hiram spoke to me, and he did what he did for everybody else. He said something to me directly at exactly the moment that I needed someone to say something to me directly. And I came up really to let his family know that we're not kidding, we're not exaggerating. Hiram said to me, the good news is that you don't have to drink anymore, or the bad news, wait, what it was, how's it go? The good news is you don't have to drink anymore. The bad news is we're your new best friends. And I looked at him and I said, there is no way you're going to ever be my new best friend. And then he spoke to me. And it was less than a week. I was one of these people that was in the weeds. I did what we call white knuckling for 18 years, and I was truly insane. And it was Hiram that explained to me what was going on with me. It took him 2 years, and I said, you oaf, why did you not tell me? Hiram knew how to do this. And it was less than a week that I was driving. I would come 3 times a day, and I'd drive, and it was Hiram that I wanted to see. And he did that for all of us. And one of the greatest testimonies to Hiram's influence is that I've been coming to the AA since 2006. I drank with Kip one night. Never forgot it. And there was Kip. But 3/4 of the people that have spoken have had more years than me. And I look, and 3/4 of the people in the room have more. We don't have seniority in AA. But it is because of our respect for Hiram. not our love, but what we watched him. The fun thing about knowing Hiram was we knew what he was going to do to the newcomer. And there was a time when Hiram kind of let you go. Me personally, I'm proud to say that I was one of the people that he flew the finger to for over 10 years. He would do it this way. Every time he'd see me in the movie, in the meeting. There was a girl today at the meeting, and really the topic, Mark made the topic service, and the topic actually was Hiram. And there was a girl that had a year birthday, and she said that Hiram used to make her go get his coffee cup. And he'd wait until she sat down, and then he'd say, "Come here." And he'd make her go get her coffee. And he did it over and over again. And what was cool was we got to watch this. But what was the miracle was Hiram taught all of us how to do this. Exactly how to do this, because this is hard. You have to learn to love yourself. I relapsed in 2010. My head was down. I was upset at the people who were saying welcome back because I didn't go anywhere. That's just my nature. I'm an alcoholic. It was Hiram that said, "Don't beat yourself up." And that line saved my life. I wondered how Hiram felt about being alive while there was a picture of him in the building. You know, my father had a catering business. I have been around this stuff. My sister was so well known because of her own charity work that when she died, the local news interrupted their daily. So I know about people like Hiram, but I'd never seen anybody that had a memorial photograph before they died. But if you knew Hiram, you understood. You know, my sister died 25 years ago. She was a breast cancer activist. And this was the way her life was celebrated. And this is kind of cool, brings back memories. I was asked to give one of the eulogies because I knew a poem. And this poem reminds me of Hiram. There's a poem by Robert Frost called "Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening," and Hiram lived by this. He had promises to keep and miles to go before he sleep. And it's repeated twice. Hiram was always here. And my sister, when she died, by the way, I was drunk when I gave the eulogy. I was under the influence. My sister, before she died, gave one last speech. And in that speech, it became famous. It's on the web if you know this quote. And she said, "If you have given pieces of yourself to others, you cannot die." To me, Hiram is immortal. Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict named Anthony. I debated whether or not I was going to come up and speak, but the truth of the matter is it was on my heart to do so. Hiram not only affected people early on, but on his way out the door. I was one of those people. I walked into the Suburban North club almost about a year ago, and Hiram was one of the first people that greeted me. He opened his arms and said, "Young man, you got a sponsor?" And that's pretty much how he addressed me until one day in a meeting, he said, "You got a sponsor yet?" And I said, no. He said, "All these people around here," and that's when I met Gary, and he was my first temporary sponsor. Hiram meant a lot to me early on because I never encountered anyone that someone else mentioned from the heart to the heart, and I felt it. He wasn't an eloquent speaker, but he was always heartfelt and sincere, and it was felt from the heart to the heart, and I've always admired Hiram, even when I didn't know his name was Hiram, right? Every time he pulled up in the van, you know, I would run to him and he'd say, "Give me a cigarette. Got a cigarette?" "Yeah, here's a cigarette." "Can you check my oil?" Yeah, check it. You know, and it wasn't anything that I wouldn't have been willing to do if he would have asked me. Why? From the heart to the heart, you know. And I picked up on that really early. Hiram meant a great deal to me. And when I heard of his passing, I felt a loss. I still feel a loss, but I'm so happy to have been a part of this, truly. And like another member just recently said, you know, when you leave a piece with people, you know, you're never dead. You're never dead. And so I'm going to continue to celebrate Hiram well after his passing until I get that 40-year token, you know. And, but he was definitely a role model, and it was truly a pleasure, God's grace, you know, to have met him in the first place. And with that, man, condolences to the family, but grateful to the family. And thank you.
Thank you to everyone for coming and celebrating Hiram. This is exactly what I had hoped for. This is not the first time that a planned event has gone so well. His 25th sobriety birthday, we had an open house for him, and Kevin and I just printed up a few flyers and picked a date, and everything else just happened. I mean, we showed up, and the tables and chairs and the food was there. It just, that's how much people love him. So, couple things. Ginger's is going to cater a meal with Hiram's favorite things. I want you to know that not only are they catering this meal, they took wonderful care of Hiram and the rest of us. A lot of us go there for breakfast. So any business you can give to Ginger's. Hiram used to pull his van up to the front door, and he'd get out, and they'd go park his van for him. And then when he was ready to go, they'd go pull the van up and get him in it and get him on his way. Monica, I was at his apartment one day. Monica's in there cleaning up his kitchen and delivering him some frozen meals. So anyway, they're good people. Give them some business. In honor of Hiram, and because we all pulled together, I want to give Diane a check for $12,000 to cover his funeral expenses. And Jody has written a poem, and that'll be the close, and we'll have a meal.
It's actually a prayer, so please join me in prayer. Good, orderly direction, giver of grace, higher power of the universe. Thank you for the love and support of family and friends. In times of loss, we are grateful we have our fellowship for comfort. Thank you for the memories we share of our loved one, Hiram. He had a friendly smile and a deep desire to welcome the newcomer. He had a passion for recovery, and when he spoke, we listened to his heartfelt shares. He kept us all in line. His light will continue to shine bright in the many lives he touched. We are committed to carrying the message in his honor. He will never be forgotten. His physical connection may be gone, but his spiritual being will always be with us. We feel his nudge in the willingness to share our number with someone in need, in the kindness to reach out and let a friend know we are thinking of them, and the love and tolerance we show to others. Nothing on earth can separate us, not time, not space, not even death. Thank you for your wisdom taught through our forever Hiram power. We will pay it forward. Amen. We can all eat now.
And I think they're serving it out there. If we need more tables, we can set them up. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you coming.